Bada, bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago. Is the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Decisions.
Wait a minute. Are you still looking for cars on Carvana?
Yeah, decisions.
When I used Carvana, I found the exact car I was looking for in minutes. Bought it on the spot.
Electric or full diesel? Decisions.
Come on, you've been at it for weeks. Just buy it already.
You're right. Crossover it is. Decisions decided.
Whether you know exactly what you want or like to take your time, buy your car the convenient way with Carvana.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. You know, one of the perks about having 4 kids that you know about is actually getting a direct line to the big man up north. And this year, he wants you to know the best gift that you can give someone is the gift of Mint Mobile's unlimited wireless for $15 a month. Now, you don't even need to wrap it. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited. See mintmobile.com for details.
There's magic in the air today, there's magic in the air. Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. I'm mostly going to be doing songs from Muppet Christmas Carol today, Kieran. So here comes Mr. Humbug, here comes Mr. Grimm. How are you this morning, Kieran?
I'm very good. I had a very enjoyable weekend. On Friday, I went to see Dr. Strangelove at that swanky West End Old Coward Theatre. Steve Coogan was brilliant. Went for a very nice meal with the Baroness. Saturday, went to see the Skids and Spear of Destiny. Richard Jobson in fine form, as always. And Sunday, I won quite a lot of money on a bet.
Did you, Kieran? What was the bet? That Richard Jobson would look older than he is? Or Dr. Strange?
Yeah, well, I thought, going back to the very first season at the Amex, Brighton lost in the League Cup to Liverpool. And they then went on quite a good run of matches at home before losing to somebody. I can't remember who that team was. And then I realised that this weekend we'd lost in the League Cup to Liverpool at home. And we'd also been unbeaten at home for the whole of the season. And we were playing exactly the same team that we played in 2013-14. So the signs were there, Kevin. And I therefore put on the bet.
Oh, unbeaten at home, you say?
Yes.
I shall add that to the list. Before we get into this week's questions, it's questions pod, Kieran. That'll be the last time I mention it, I promise. Except maybe on the Christmas quiz that we were recording tonight, and maybe it might come up again. It probably won't. Bill Leslie is obviously the Sky commentator. He's clearly a Brighton fan. He wasn't happy at all, was he?
He wasn't the only one, to be fair.
Well, that's true. Mind you, it's 2024 and he's not a window cleaner. He calls himself Bill, so, what can you expect? Just a reminder, you can now sign up for the brand new Price of Football Club. The benefits of signing up include ad-free listening, access to the full back catalogue, extra questions episodes, early access to interview episodes, early access to live tickets, monthly Zoom Q&A, invitation to Zoom quizzes, and you can get all that for just £3.99 a month or £39.99 a year, a deal that's so ridiculous, Kira, we should have one of those big, giant, inflatable men like they have in front of second-hand car showrooms, because we are literally giving this away. Our regular Tuesday questions episode and Thursday news episodes will, of course, always be available for free in the existing feed, but when you sign up, you'll get access to our Price of Football Club feed, which we totally ad-free and full of bonus content. So sign up for the Price of Football Club today by going to priceoffootball.com and follow the links to all our existing Patreon subscribers. And a lot of people have asked us this, Kieran. A lot of people have joined the club already, which is lovely. So existing Patreon subscribers, please feel free to cancel your existing subscription and then start a new one by following the links on the website, our Patreon page, and feed will keep running for now, but we'll turn it off at the end of February. The bonus content won't appear on the Patreon feed, so make the switch today so you don't miss anything. I've sounded as sincere then as I sounded when we record the adverts and the promos. We do have a news story to talk about before we get into questions, Kieran. But before we get into the news story, I just warn you that at some stage during this pod, you're very likely to hear a very loud 1950s style cheery Cockney knock on the door. Because we have an actual lawn growing in our gutter, and Alfie, the gutter geezer, says it's because the parakeets have been dropping seeds in your gutter and has turned grass seeds. He's adamant it was parakeets. Parakeets can't hold their seed, you see. They get too much and they drop it in the gutter and the grass seed turns into a lawn. He told Ali all this. I wasn't in when he knocked on the door and said we had to have our lawn taken out of our gutter. But he's coming round today to do that. So if that happens, I will have to leave him for 1 minute while I let him in. And obviously leave his cash in a safe place because I'll just prefer cash, Kev. You know what I'm saying? Saudi Arabia had been confirmed as the host to the 2034 World Cup, Kieran. I think before we discuss this, the least important aspect is the fact that it might have to be another Winter World Cup. You can't give World Cups depending on where the football season is in Europe. Otherwise the World Cup will only ever be in Europe. So as far as I'm concerned, they can resolve when it is. That's not an issue. There are many, many other issues to resolve. Not the least, it wasn't even a vote, Kieran. People just applauded on Zoom until Infantino decided they were applauding enough to get the old clapometer up to 100, and Saudi Arabia got the World Cup. It's not a decision that's gone down well with the Western media, shall we say, Kieran?
Yeah, I know a club executive for whom the clapometer might be appropriate, but I'm not even prepared to give that to our Price of Football subscribers. Yes, it was a coronation. And I've been reading a lot of articles, and I've got to say that the most intriguing article I've read, and I think the most measured one, has been from a very good friend, Matt Slater, in The Athletic, who said, lots of people are forming a judgment. How many people who have formed that judgment have not actually been to Saudi Arabia? And he has. And I felt that his was a fair assessment. And you can agree or disagree with the conclusions. And the very fact that we can agree or disagree with the conclusions in our society is something which you wouldn't necessarily be able to do elsewhere. And that's not just in Saudi Arabia. So I think there's a much broader issue to look at here. My concern is in respect of the process. When FIFA announced the 2034 World Cup decision was going to be made, they made it a joint decision with the awarding of the 2030 World Cup. Now, the last time that took place was in respect of 2018 and 2032, which went respectively to Russia and Qatar. That again was a very unusual decision. It should not take a country 10 years to prepare for a World Cup. So it does seem to be a very significant amount of leeway in terms of time being given. And you cannot say the same with regards to those those countries and football associations that were considering whether or not to apply to host the 2034 World Cup, because FIFA only gave them a month to put together their application. And if you take a look at the brief for the application, it is a very, very thick document. An awful lot of work has to be undertaken. I know that the Australian Football Association was certainly considering this. It had to be from Asia. And again, a cynic would say, and let's be honest, we're not cynics. A cynic might say that having the 2030 World Cup held in South America, Europe, and Africa effectively knocked out those three continents. We've got Central and and North America in the 2026. So that work knocks out those two continents. So it had to be Asia. and Australia, I think they were a bit peeved. So, given that, there's no reason why it couldn't have gone to a formal vote, even though Saudi Arabia were the only applicant. But Infantino didn't seem to want to go down that route, and this is the thing which really disappoints me. If people want to express their reservations, they should be allowed to do so. And the way that Infantino has conducted himself is pretty reprehensible and unprofessional. The decision to award it to Saudi Arabia, yeah, if I get the chance, I might go there. Yeah, I'm not. I don't want to prejudge. I've worked in the Middle East. I've worked extensively in Russia. I've been very fortunate to travel all around the world, working in different countries whose political systems and economic systems you don't necessarily agree with. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed the right to host a World Cup.
Oh, no, absolutely. Look, on a day when my head is full of Muppet Christmas Carol tunes, Kieran, I don't really want to be cynical, but it's hard. There's no real reason why Spain and Morocco should have been encouraged to. I mean, I know they have historical and not always happy links to each other. But the idea that Uruguay, I believe Paraguay and Argentina got thrown a game each in that World Cup because it's going to be the 100th anniversary of the first World Cup. It's hard not to think that was a cynical decision to knock South America out of the running for the 2034 World Cup. And then only giving Australia 3.5 weeks to put in a rival bid, which they knew wasn't going to happen. The Australian FA have said themselves, we knew which way the wind was blowing. It's just this idea of not having I know Norway tried very hard to get other countries in UEFA to protest the vote or to vote against it or abstain. And it seems, disappointingly, they got very little shrift. But Norway didn't even get the chance to publicly make their stance clear. And this idea of, it's 1950s Russia, Kieran. This idea of 230 odd delegates across the world on a Zoom call standing up to applaud until such time as Infantino did decide that they'd applauded enough and therefore they obviously wanted it. It's just ridiculous. They've bought the World Cup, Kieran. That's the bottom line. Is they've bought the World Cup. You can dress it up in whatever language you want. They've bought the World Cup, and Infantino could barely be asked to acknowledge the Amnesty International concerns, the concerns of LGBT groups. All he said was, "We've raised these issues and we're confident they will be dealt with." Dealt with covers a lot of bases. So this is, every country in the world that has a football heritage deserves to have the World Cup. Saudi Arabia doesn't have a heritage. There's a reason why they want the World Cup. There's a reason why they want the Olympics, and it's not sporting. So, and they can send me as many emails as they want that are obviously from people in the Saudi Arabian embassy. It's not going to change my mind. So, on to questions, Kieran. Michael Savage has our first question. And he says, as we all know, whenever the footballing world talk about the archetypal well-run clubs, Brighton and Brentford are always the first clubs mentioned, especially by Brighton fans. If only, as somebody said to me yesterday, we were doing that Brighton Samaritans gig this week, Kieran, they might...
we would needed a bigger venue.
They might not be quite as smug. And also, we could perhaps have asked laughing boy P.T. Darren why it takes so long for Palace fans to get out of the bloody place. Anyway, Michael Savage says, my club, Plymouth Argyle, have been trying to go down the same data-driven route, trying to compensate for a lower budget by boxing cleverer than our rivals. This method has had considerable success, but now in the Championship, bigger clubs, in inverted commas, have moved in to take our manager, as well as arguably our best player. In both cases, we just can't match the money involved, and no amount of data-driven nerdery could stop it. So my question is this. Is it really true that Brighton and Brentford were able to change their place in the football pyramid just as a result of being smart and well run? Or is the more boring reality that it wouldn't have been possible without the addition of considerable outside investment at the same time? Which I think, club rivalry aside, Kieran, is a very good question. And it does have an impact. Yeah, we've talked about the impact of data. Sorry to use the same word twice in the same sentence, but we've talked about the impact of data a lot recently. But you're talking about two clubs here that have had a lot of money poured into it, as well as a lot of boffins.
Yes. Without the generosity and benevolence of Tony Bloom and Matthew Benham, neither Brighton nor Brentford would be playing in new stadiums. Neither club would be in the Premier League. Neither club would be in the top half of the Premier League. So it's a combination. And I do think that you've got to look at things not just in isolation. At the same time, there are other clubs. If I take a look at Brighton were losing effectively £20 million a year in the Championship. And that money was coming from Tony Bloom. Now, some years were a wee bit better than that, but that's the standard losses. Losing 400 grand a week in the Championship is par for the course. And if you take a look at Bristol City, if you take a look at other clubs, Borough and so on, they've all incurred significant losses, and again they have had the same broad ownership model. Local lad supports his local club, wants to see that club get to the Premier League, and Borough have managed it under Steve Gibson, and Borough fans owe him a great debt for all of his continued investment. It's exactly the same with Bristol City. It's exactly the same at many other clubs. So, where did the benefits of the ownership really take place? Certainly, it was a contributory factor to getting to the Premier League, because they didn't have an advantage over other clubs financially. They were on an even keel, and actually Brentford had a smaller budget than other clubs, and Brentford's player identification model allowed them to continue to invest in players and to continue to recruit. Where I think the advantage has actually taken place is once they've got to the Premier League, because if you're looking at places in the Premier League based purely on fan base and history and so on, neither Brighton nor Brentford should be there. Leeds should be there. Sunderland should be there. There's other clubs that would probably take our place. Other clubs who can attract bigger crowds on a more regular basis, and also have all of the benefits of that history and heritage. So this is where I think the models. And again, for the sake of complete transparency, I have meetings with Brentford on a regular basis, and I can only say that I'm spectacularly impressed by the level of professionalism at the club. Clearly, I'm smarting following yesterday's result, but every Brighton fan I've spoken to said, "Well, Palace were the better team." So we got no complaints about yesterday's result. At the same time, I think we've got one of the best boards in the country.
So, I mean, basically what you're saying, Kieran, to answer Michael's question, it's better to be smart and well run anyway, at whatever level you're at. That's going to get you further than not being not smart and not well run, essentially, as we've seen with quite a few clubs.
That's right. I mean, I keep on going on this mantra about any successful business comes down to three elements: opportunities, resources, and decision making. Now, neither Brighton nor Brentford have the resources of all of the other clubs in the Premier League. They do have the opportunities in the sense that they are participants within the Premier League at the start of each season. So in order for them to punch above their weight, which is what they are doing, is down to the quality of executive decision making. And I think that's where they get more decisions right than they get wrong. Can that last forever? No. Ultimately, I think there's always a danger of gravity will drag you down, but it's certainly a contributory factor to the relative success. Remember, we're talking relative success. Brighton finished in the top half of the division twice in their history. Brentford are Brentford are playing great football, even though they've lost their best player. That comes down to the really smart decisions they've made at boardroom level in terms of recruitment and having a fantastic coach.
This is a paid advertisement for Shopify. I feel like I'm missing out because it seems like everyone is either starting a side hustle or becoming their own boss. And you know what they're hearing a lot? It's the sound of another sale on Shopify, the all-in-one commerce platform to start, run, and grow your business.
Shopify is the commercial platform revolutionising millions of businesses worldwide. Whether you're selling bespoke doggy treats or even yeast extract and cheese-related bakery products, Shopify simplifies selling online and in person so you can successfully grow your business. Covering all your sales channels, from a shop-ready POS system to its all-in-one e-commerce platform, Shopify even gets you selling across social media marketplaces like Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Full of the industry-leading tools ready to ignite your growth, Shopify gives you complete control over your business and your brand without learning new skills in design or coding. And thanks to award-winning help and with an extensive business course library, Shopify is ready to support your success every step of the way.
Sign up for a £1 per month trial period at shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball, all lowercase. So go to shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball to take your business to the next level today. That's shopify.co.uk/priceoffootball.
We have one more act for you this evening. I don't even need to say his name. Mr. Bob Dylan.
From the director of Walk the Line and Ford vs. Ferrari.
If anyone is going to hold your attention on stage, you have to kind of be a freak.
And starring Timothy Chalamet as Bob Dylan.
Are you a freak?
Hope so.
Once upon a time, you're just so fine.
Inspired by the true story.
I want to know which side he's on.
This Christmas.
They just want me singing Blowing in the Wind for the rest of my life.
Bobby, what do you want to be?
Whatever it is they don't want me to be.
He defied everyone.
Turn it down!
Play loud!
To change everything.
He's our Elvis.
With no direction.
Timothy Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro.
Make some noise, BD. Track some mud on the carpet.
A complete unknown. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
Yeah, of course you can be a smart and well-run club, but every now and again just come up against a morally superior team occasionally. What interests me about this question, though, is that there are people, and I'm looking at Sir Jim Ratcliffe here, who would probably quibble with our definition of smart, really, because from a purely business point of view, he would say that Brentford freezing their season ticket prices, for example, isn't smart, whereas what he's doing is smart. So from a purely business point of view, he could be right, couldn't he? But from a fan-based point of view, the Brentford approach is smarter than the Man United approach.
Jim Ratcliffe is running a business. He's got no interest in fans as such. He sees them purely as customers. I'm not saying other clubs don't see them as partly as customers. And his focus is on maximising revenue from customers. And if that involves sacking 250 staff, if that involves making everybody work in the office at Old Trafford, even though there's not enough room for everybody to work in the office at Old Trafford, because that's his dogma, that's his mantra, that's fine. I think the danger is that you do alienate the fan base and the well of goodwill that existed towards Ratcliffe when he first took over the club is starting to wane. And if we're honest, if it had not been for the last 2 minutes at the Etihad yesterday, it would have been you'd have seen a much more hostile reaction. So it's a philosophy issue. Jim Ratcliffe's not interested in football. He's interested in the cult of Jim Ratcliffe, and that is different to Brentford say we are a community club, and I think that's reflected in the decisions that they've made, and they deserve a hell of an amount of applause. And we've got them next at home.
That was a terrible game at Manchester Derby yesterday. Not that I cared, because I was dressed as Kermit.
Yes, I can imagine.
I was dressed as Kermit from A Muppet Christmas Carol at the time, drinking champagne out of a cornflake box. Nick Andrews Govan has our next question. And Nick says, Reading FC men were handing a points deduction for not paying wages. However, Reading FC women were not. Is that because they had paid their wages, or are the rules not the same for the two leagues? I presume, Kieran, it's because they're two separate legal entities, are they?
That's right. The WSL and the EFL have their own set of criteria. As far as I can see in the WSL constitution, the main issue with regards to wages, and this is a bit of a strange one, is that there is a soft wage cap in the sense that you cannot spend more than 40% of your revenues on wages. And that provides the focus, and I can assure you that Reading are well below that. Whereas it comes to the men's team, and I think you've got to give our friend Trevor Birch here a lot of credit for changing the philosophy of clubs in the EFL. What the EFL are trying to do is to ensure that wages are paid on time by threatening the owners with points deductions. And you might say, well, hold on, if a club gets a points deduction, does that affect the owner? Well, first of all, it increases the hostility towards the owner. Secondly, it increases the chances of relegation for the club involved by having transfer embargoes, points deductions, and so on. And if you get relegated, there's no financial benefits of being relegated. So it does it indirectly. I know it affects the fans as well. I'm not denying that at all. But that's the logic behind it. And also, it's not fair on other clubs. If you've committed yourself to a wage budget that you can't afford, then that's not fair on all of the other clubs in the division who have committed themselves to a wage budget which can be paid for. So that's why they are two different entities and there are two different sets of rules.
Ben Tooth, Kieran, has a good old-fashioned early days price of football question.
Yes.
And quite simply, Ben Tooth says, where do Aston Villa stand with regards to PSR?
There's known unknowns and there's unknown unknowns when it comes to PSR. Was it Dick Cheney who... Was that his comment?
I believe it was, yeah. Known unknown knowns and known yeah.
That's right.
Like how much money did you make out of betting against your club, Kieran? You know, that sort of known unknown, which will remain unknown known.
Oh yeah. Not enough, but still more than I wanted to win. So in relation to this, Villa had a sort of very good get-out-of-jail-free card for PSR for 3 seasons when they sold Jack Grealish. And we've spent many a time discussing the benefits of selling former academy players. Well, Villa picked up £100 million worth of contribution towards PSR for 3 seasons. Now, that has expired. Having said that, they were able to sign players just before the end of the June transfer window, and they also sold players. Now, Villa will have done their sums, and they will have worked out that those transactions probably kept them under the PSR calculations as far as season 23-24 was concerned, as have other clubs. The 6 clubs who were sort of having flash. There were big amber flashing lights, if not red, and those 6 clubs were Chelsea, Forest, Villa, Newcastle, Everton, and Leicester. So all of those clubs were involved in player sales just before the June 30th deadline. So I think Villa probably crept in under the line. A lot will depend this season on the degree of progress that the club makes as far as the Super League is not Super League, Champions League is concerned. And Villa have made a pretty decent start. So I think if the further they get in that competition, it will be very financially advantageous for them to do so. So I don't see a huge issue. Does that mean that they can go and spend £100 million in January? I don't think they can. But I think they are one of many clubs who can make a modest adjustment. And the reason why I say that is back to our old friend amortization. If you sign a player for £45 million in January, you're only and he's on a 4.5-year contract. That means in the period to the 30th of June 2025, it's only a £5 million cost. to you in terms of amortization. You sell a couple of players as well. You could actually be fairly cash neutral or fairly PSR neutral. So I don't think Villa are in a terrible position. They're on a sort of a up and down period as far as league position was concerned, but I don't think they are dumb enough to budget to finish in a European place every year. And when they will have done their budgets, they're probably budgeted to be top 8 and will be in line with PSR accordingly.
I don't know how fans know this, Kieran. I think it's partly our fault, but whenever you mention PSR or FFP in a pub, football fans will tap their nose wisely and say, yeah, Villa sailing close to the wind. I don't know why that should be public knowledge, but most football fans seem to assume that it is the case that Villa are deliberately kind of putting a little toe across the line and then dragging it back again.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Villa don't have a lot of room to manoeuvre, but they do have some. I'm in contact with quite a few journalists these days, some of which are based in the Midlands, some of which are based up northwest, and so on. And PSR and clubs in breach is one of the things which comes up in conversation. I think it's fair to say that in all of those conversations, there is one club that the journalists seem to think is most at risk in terms of breach of PSR rules, but that club ain't Villa as far as the Premier League is concerned.
Okay. That's interesting. Alistair Bassett has our next question, Kieran. It starts off sort of cheerful and charitable, and then gets a bit cynical. Gets a bit cynical at the end. Which, as it's Muppet Christmas Carol day, I'm not sure what about. It's a very good question. Alistair Bassett says, I have a question about Super Cups. More and more European countries are taking their Super Cups, the trophy that's given to the winner of a game between the league and the cup, and hosting them abroad. Saudi Arabia in the case of Spain, Italy, various different countries in the case of France. And they're expanding them to 4 teams. This is obviously to make more money for both the clubs and the association. But given England's Super Cup, the Community Shield, is effectively a glorified pre-season friendly, could you see a scenario where that is expanded to 4 teams? So, for example, they can invite the winners of the Carabao Cup and the EFL Trophy. It's put a little winky face here, Alistair Bassett. I'm not entirely I don't like it when I think I'm missing something. And hold that in Saudi Arabia. I know the Community Shield has its charitable history, but it's not even called the Charity Shield anymore because apparently they weren't giving enough money to charity. So why not do away with it and increase the coffers of the FA and let the clubs that win everything just get richer?
Yes, that was a twist in the tail, wasn't it?
Yeah. What he says, no cheeses for us Mises, is what he's saying.
Alistair raises an interesting point here.
Yeah.
Everything is in play at present. I can assure you there is no desire from the clubs that participate in the Community Shield for the current Community Shield because it's not good from a club's finances point of view. And therefore, could that be sold as part of an FA package to the highest bidder? Well, yes, it could. I think the problem is there jeopardy in this competition? Because I'm not sure. I presume that the Community Shield took place between Manchester United and Manchester City in August, but I can't remember, and I don't particularly care who won or lost. So, in order to attract a decent TV audience, I think you do need that jeopardy. Expanding it to 4 clubs could certainly make it more intriguing. I think the issue as far as the individual clubs is concerned is, are they robbing Peter to pay Paul? I.e., would the money from participating in this tournament be sufficient to compensate for perhaps having to have a curtailed pre-season tour? And you might say, well, why not sort it out closer to the time? The issue there is that pre-season tours are sorted out well in advance, especially for the bigger clubs. So we've already seen talk of Liverpool going to Asia. There are other, I can assure you, there are other major clubs where they've already agreed with the promoters how much the clubs are going to be charging for playing a match in Indonesia or Dallas or Riyadh or wherever it's going to be. And once you sign those contracts, it's very difficult to extricate yourself from those contracts. So there is that as an element of uncertainty. At the same time, if you get the timing right for these tournaments, there's no reason why you couldn't have 3 games, even potentially 4 games. So a third and fourth place playoff for such a tournament would look particularly cheesy, and that would raise revenues. And as Alistair said, it could be beneficial to those clubs that probably in least need of extra finances.
I mean, the time was, Kieran. I mean, you couldn't wait for the Charity Shield. You breathed a huge sigh of relief because it meant long, hot summer was over and football was coming back. And Wembley was always sold out and they were always taken seriously. You quite often see that bust up between Billy Bremner and Kevin Keegan. People forget that was in the Charity Shield.
Yes.
It's in a friendly, essentially, but you couldn't wait for it. And also, it seemed there was more imagination back then. I mean, you had things like the Watley's Cup, which I think was between the top scorer in each of the 4 divisions, which, I mean, it wouldn't work now because the Premier League team would wipe the floor with the other 3. But I think Alistair's got a point. There is scope for a little something different as what Brian Moore always used to call the traditional curtain raiser. The problem is, as you say, the likelihood is it would end up, the Premier League team would end up being Palace because all the other teams were still abroad or whatever, and then we'd lose to Walsall in the final. So that would be it. But we'd console ourselves, Kieran, because we've done the double over Brighton. I'm predicting that. I'm predicting we're going to do the double over you now.
First time since 1932.
It will be, yeah. Well, I think yesterday was only the 3rd time we've beaten you since the pod started. Basically, yes. We certainly haven't beaten you for 4 seasons. Barclay Webster has our next question. Strong name, Barclay Webster. Barclay says televised betting adverts are to be banned in Ireland between 5:30 a.m. and 9 p.m. I've heard concerns from the racing industry, but what impact could this have on football in Ireland? And are there any potential knock-on effects for broadcast deals for the Premier League, etc.? I think just as a side note, the racing industry in Ireland is in very good health, certainly much more so than in Britain at the moment. But this is an interesting question about the knock-on effect, because very few of the betting adverts you see on our TV, Kieran, Sky in particular, are for horse racing. Mainly for football, isn't it? Mainly it's inviting people to bet on football, especially on ACCAs, because they want you to do ACCAs because you've got even less chance of winning than if you just do one. Why football fans don't see through that is beyond me. When it's all you have to do is pick 6 teams. It's hard enough picking 1 team to win, let alone picking 6 teams.
I bet on 1 match yesterday confidently, and won as a result of it. I didn't have an ACCA. So I think you've raised an issue here, Barclay, of concern in the sense that my experience of the betting industry is that it is imaginative, it is creative, and what we will see are alternatives to televised betting adverts. So there will be a move towards different types of. Ultimately, you see the adverts for the people that are prepared to pay the most. I don't know enough about this particular campaign. Does it, for example, include bingo adverts? Because the betting industry has moved away from fixed odd. I'm not saying that football betting is a loss leader, because it's not, because it is profitable, as is horse racing. But you've actually got very, very tight margins because there are so many different gambling companies, and because they want to have an edge, it means that the more competition you have, the better the odds that tend to be available. And you've got gambling comparison sites, so you can pick up the best odds if that's the route that you want to go down. I think all you will see is a shift towards those things which are gambling but not gambling. So, presumably slots would be banned because that is gambling. It's bingo, that's not seen as gambling. You will start to see programs being sponsored by gambling companies as opposed to adverts. So there still will be a high profile for the industry. In terms upon the impact for the Premier League, if it was replicated, it would hit Sky initially more than anybody else. The Premier League has committed to removal of front of shirt deals from known gambling companies from season 2026. But again, what you will see is a shift. You will see more crypto advertising. You will see just as much, if not more, perimeter advertising at Premier League grounds. And you will see all of the shirt sleeve adverts shift from front to sleeve. So there will be a reaction, but there will not be an elimination.
I apologise if you can hear the banging in the background. I'm slightly concerned as to why removing some grass from the gutter should involve so much hammer work. I've now got visions of my drain pipe having fallen off, and they're desperately trying to put it back on before I notice. The bingo thing, Kieran, is a very interesting one, because I know a lot of anti-gambling campaigners are very concerned. Bingo adverts are now very cleverly done because they invite you to join chat rooms. They invite you to talk to your friends and have a little friendly gossip online. And while you're there, why not bung £100 on a couple of bingo? So it's a very insidious form of gambling. Invidious, I beg your pardon. And, Paddy Power will just see this as a challenge. Paddy Power, who are, whatever you say about the gambling industry, very light-hearted, funny adverts that clearly are aimed at a younger audience, but they'll find a way. They'll find a way around it. They'll get Peter Crouch. They'll get Peter Crouch to knock on your door live. Like the post, he'd do it as well. And Barry from EastEnders ain't going to say no to any job, is he? Basically, quite clearly. Kenny Anderson has our final question. Kenny says, "How do loan fees and contributions to wages work? Would it be more simple to pay all of the players' wages or pay the loan fee rather than a combination? Is there a tax/contract implication here, or maybe a variable element?"
Okay, this is a fair question, Kenny. A football player has a contract of employment with his or her host club, and that is the determinant of the monthly salary that the player receives. So if you're playing for Palace, you've got a contract for Palace, and they put you out on loan to, Millwall or Charlton or Bromley, whoever it's going to be. You are still contractually entitled to receive your monthly wages, and that's to protect you as much as anything else. Because what happens if Bromley go bust? You go, hold on, I'm doing this effectively as a favour to the club because I signed for Crystal Palace. So all of the wages and the national insurance and the pension contributions are determined by the contract that you've signed with the host club. As far as the contribution to wages is concerned, that is a deal between the two football clubs, and that's very much a separate contract. The benefit of such an approach is that if Palace, let's say they're charging a loan fee and it's going to be 50% of your wages plus £500,000, then there are VAT issues there, but there's no national insurance. So it just makes it a lot easier for the payroll department to not have to deal with things such as national insurance as far as Palace are concerned or Bromley is concerned, because you're out on loan elsewhere. So as far as the tax issue is concerned, it makes life easier, and it also protects the player, assuming that the host club is continuing to be run in an appropriate way where it's paying the wages on time.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Prime. There's nothing sweeter than baking cookies during the holidays. With Prime, I get all my ingredients delivered right to my door, fast and free, no last-minute store trips needed. And of course, I blast my favorite holiday playlist on Amazon Music. It's the ultimate soundtrack for creating unforgettable memories. From streaming to shopping, it's on Prime. Visit Amazon.com/Prime to get more out of whatever you're into.
This episode is brought to you by AWS. Amazon Q Business is the new generative AI assistant from AWS. Many tasks can make business slow, like wading through mud. Help! Luckily, there's a faster, easier, less messy choice. Amazon Q can securely understand your business data to help you streamline tasks, like summarizing quarterly results or doing complex analyses in no time. Q got this. Learn what Amazon Q Business can do for you at aws.com/learn more.
Thank you to all our Patreon subscribers, especially 9-year-old listener Freddie Price, who's a regular listener with his dad Sam and a keen stats and mathematics whiz. Freddie, Christmas coming up. You can sign up for the Price of Football Club now. Get dad signed up as well, possibly mum. All the details are on our website. If you'd like a question answered on the show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, X, and find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book, you can go to a bookshop or you can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday with our regular news episode. Some stage in the next few days, we'll have our first extra questions episode out for our Price of Football Club members. Unfortunately, Kieran's looking at me as blankly as I'm looking at him because we've both forgotten what day that's going to be. It might be next week, but it's on the way. The first one's on the way. Don't you worry. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, as always, to everybody that gets in contact with us, that keeps us on the straight and narrow, that objects to Finlay sitting on a seat in the train. And it doesn't matter what it is, we take your observations and criticisms and appropriately. And also to everybody that has supported us from Patreon over the last few years. Thank you so much. It's very kind. We do put a lot of effort. Even though the show might appear ramshackle and amateur, we do a lot of background work beforehand, and we do it in such a professional way that it doesn't show. But there's another way that you can support the show, and that's to give us a review. That's to go on to your Spotify app or your Apple app or your Amazon app or whoever it may be, whoever your podcast provider is, and give us a review. It helps us in terms of tables and charts and league positions and so on, and just gives us a little bit more credibility when we're trying to persuade people to come on the show. And we do have a long list of potential guests coming up in the new year as well, which we're very much looking forward to. Doesn't matter what you say. You could even say you'd rather have the show presented by Peter Crouch and Barry from EastEnders.
They're on the way now.
Yes. Who's that walking up your drive? And it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference to us.
What Grinch objected to Finley's taking up a seat on the train? It's my favourite photograph. He looks so proud.
Yes.
Sitting next to Daddy on the train.
And I actually asked the train manager beforehand, because he was on the floor, and the train manager said, the train manager, who was absolutely brilliant, first of all brought him a bowl of water, which was incredibly kind. He said, if he wants to sit next to you, we've got no objection. It's far better than all those people that put their feet up on the trains, seats, which seems to be, I'm turning into my old man now, seems to be a thing that the youth are all doing.
Well, you know what I say, Kieran? It's in the singing of a street corner choir. It's coming home and getting warm by the... Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.